What else can we do with something that is a verb and is not a noun? We can form different tenses, not only the first person, second person, third person present, but we can form past tenses. And notice how we do that in English is by adding ed to the end of the verb. So for example, if you have a sentence like, I walked to the store, so our verb walked here is showing up with this ed marker at the end, what we call a morpheme, because it's part of a word. And we know that the meaning that this is giving to the sentence is that this event of walking took place at some point in the past. It is not being described as an event that's going on now. We'd say, I am walking to the store, or an event that would happen in the future, I will walk to the store, but it's instead walked, in other words, sometime before the point at which I said this sentence, the event takes place. So this is the past tense ed marker. And if you can have the past tense ed marker on a word, then you know that it must be a verb, because only verbs can appear with tenses. Nouns cannot appear with tenses. So for example, if you had something that you thought was a noun, and you did the test for nounhood, and you said, okay, cats, plural, the cat's toy, genitive, so it looks like by those two tests, it's a nominal, and then you said, okay, can I form the third person singular with this word, he cats the doll, or something like that, or just he cats. Notice that that doesn't work. It's not a possible sentence. Why? Because this requires third person singular present tense s, and that's only possible when you have a verb, which you do not have here. So we could then do our next test. He catted. And we would say that this sentence is unacceptable. It's not a sentence of English that we would expect to hear. Why? Because the marker ed is a marker that appears only at the end of verbs. And the word cat in English is only a noun. So we cannot use a noun as if it were a verb. So we have the past tense ed marker as the second test for what we know is a verb in English. And if you look at your list, you're going to see the third marker that can appear on verbs in English is what we call the progressive marker. And that shows up as ing. So for example, if you have a sentence like, he is, and then you have the verb sing, why can we not say he is sing? Meaning, this singing is happening now, we have to say he is singing. And that's because this is what we call the progressive marker. It's not really so important what the terminology is that we use to describe all these different markers, but what's important is that you're able to do the test by picking a word out of a sentence and saying, okay, can I form the plural? Yes, it must be a noun. Can I form the genitive? Yes, it must be a noun. Can I form third person singular present tense? Yes, it's a verb. Can I form ed, past tense? Yes, it's a verb. And the same with ing. If you can add ing, then you know that it is going to be a verb, because if you have something that is not a verb, like the word cat, he is catting, we would know how to say that. It's possible to say it, but it just doesn't make any sense, right? It doesn't sound like an English sentence. So we're going to put a star next to it to show that this is a really, really weird sentence. If somebody said that to you while they're having a conversation with you, you'd be like, okay, what are they talking about? Like he goes hunting for cats or something like that, right? So the idea is that because cat is a noun, it can't undergo this process. Only verbs can take ing. So when you have as well what we call the past participle, this is another thing that will only work with verbs. It will not work with any other category of word in English. So the examples that you have here, eat and eaten, the pizza was eaten yesterday. If you look at this example and you look at the verb that you have here, eaten, what's going on with this verb? We have the eat part of the verb, which gives the meaning of the action of eating, and then what is this en? This en is appearing as what we call the past participle form. So the past participle form of a sentence is the form of the verb that you get when you have, for example, the passive voice. So notice that when you say the pizza was eaten yesterday, that's related to the active sentence, someone ate the pizza yesterday. So the pizza is the object of the eating, and when we move it into subject position, we get passive voice, and we use the past participle to show that. So any example of a word in which you can use the past participle, you know for sure it must be what? A verb. Now notice that not all verbs show up with the en for the past participle. You have differences. So for example, if you said, the dog was hit by the car, the dog was hit by the car, and we look at this word hit, what's going on here? We don't say the dog was hitten by the car, but looks like we have a passive structure here, a passive sentence. So why are we not forming this verb into the past participle with en? The reason is that this is an irregular verb. So just as we have irregular nouns, child, not childs, but children, the same is true for verbs. Many verbs in English form their past participle by changing nothing at all, by adding nothing at all to the end. So keep that in mind. When we're talking about all of these tests, what we want to know is, can we form a plural in some way? It doesn't matter if it's really with the s, or if it's with ren, or if it's by adding nothing to the end of the sentence, to the end of the word. If you can form a plural in any way, it's a noun. And so for the verbs, just to summarize, third person singular, present tense, s. If you can have that, then you know it's a verb. If you can have the past tense marker ed, you know that it's a verb. If you can have the progressive marker ing, you know it's a verb. And if you can have the past participle form, which depends upon the verb, it can be en, it can be ed, it can be, as in this example, actually nothing at all. But in other words, you put it in the environment where it is a past participle, then you know you have a verb. We'll talk about adjectives in a minute.